Okay, very nice.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So, sir, shall I take this further?
Yes, of course.
All right. So first of all, I wish everyone present in this session a very good morning. Today's lecture has been arranged on behalf of Mr. Justice Emil Painse, Environmental Law Chair of Maharashtra National University, Mumbai, with the help of our Chair Professor, Dr. Anil Varyat, and Program Coordinator, Ms. Gauri Rane, and the entire team working for this chair. I would like to start off by sharing a few words about our university. Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai, established under Maharashtra National Law University Act 2014, is one of the premier national law universities in India. The Act sought to establish a legal institution in Maharashtra with the aim of imparting advanced legal education and promoting society-oriented research in legal studies. In furtherance of the same objective, the Justice Emil Painse Environmental Law Chair of MNLU Mumbai was established by Mr. Justice Emil Painse Foundation. Since its inception, the team has been striving to create general awareness about the need for environmental protection and has been advocating for robust laws that can help curb the abuse of natural resources. It is with immense pleasure that I, Aditi Murali, moderate today's session, which is one of the many discussions held in pursuance of this awareness campaign undertaken by the chair. I would now like to introduce the esteemed guest speaker for today's session, Professor C.K. Vashni, who has a stellar record as an academician, an educator, but most importantly, as a staunch environmentalist who has largely contributed in policy making related to environmental conservation. Professor C.K. Vashni is Professor Emeritus in Environmental Sciences, former Dean and retired professor affiliated with the School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is a distinguished adjunct professor at the Asian Institute of Technology, AIT Bangkok, and a member of the governing board of Wetland International, South Asia. Professor Vashni has previously taught at the Banaras Hindu University and University of Delhi, and he served as a visiting professor at several renowned universities of India. Sir was also the academic director of the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design India program, an initiative of the Rockefeller Foundation. Professor Vashni has served the Government of India as Secretary of National Committee on Environmental Planning and Coordination, that is NCEPC, and has also served as Chairman of ERC, the Environment Research Committee, and has also been a member of several expert committees for environmental appraisal of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. Professor Vashni was the member secretary of the official Indian delegation to the historic UN Conference on Human Environment at Stockholm in 1972, and the leader of the Indian delegation to the Intergovernmental Meeting of Ramsar Convention at Groningen in the Netherlands. A professor has also served as the founder secretary of the Indian National Committee for UNESCO's Man and the Biosphere Program, which is MAB. And our guest is also a proud recipient of Swami Pranavanand Saraswati National Award for Environmental Sciences and Ecology and Vasvik Award in Environmental Sciences and Technology. He is a fellow of the Indian Association for Air Pollution Control, FIAAPC, and of International Society of Environmental Botanists, that is FISCB. Professor Vashni has also guided a large number of doctoral and postdoctoral scholars, has authored many books and published several research papers in internationally reputed journals. So we are highly honored to have you here with us to talk about the importance of biodiversity for sustainable development goals and the human welfare. And our audience would be highly grateful to you if you could share your valuable insights about the same. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Anil for inviting me and contacting me to really deliver this lecture at Maharashtra National Law University, which is a very, I should say, honor for me to do that. Firstly, because that I am not related with law at any point of time in my professional career, but the subject that I deal has a very significant interface with the law. And I think it is a pleasure to talk to the faculty and to the students of your university on this subject. So I welcome the audience, the ladies and gentlemen, to the topic that I'm going to discuss, which really is of great concern and interest to each individual and is of considerable significance for our future welfare. Now, the term biodiversity is very commonly used and has made great inroads in the lexicon of specialists, planners, politicians, and general public at a very fast rate. And this in itself is very significant. Biodiversity, in fact, is the synthesis term which has two separate terms which have been rammed together, biological and second diversity. And they are all joined together, they are zipped together to be called as biodiversity. So today what we are going to do is, first of all, I will, with the help of some slides, try to explain that what biodiversity is. What does it mean? Because many people use this word and use this word very frequently in various contexts. And perhaps they only have understood partially or only one aspect rather than the complete spectrum of meaning and relationship of biodiversity. Also, people often talk about biodiversity preservation. And I think Madam Aditi Morel has also mentioned in her introductory remark that we are concerned about biodiversity preservation. So my humble request is that the term preservation has really succeeded by conservation. Preservation is something which means that it remains where it is. So we preserve a prickle, but we don't ever preserve a biodiversity. It means that everything arrested, but biodiversity is highly dynamic. So a dynamic system cannot remain arrested. These are two contradictory. So earlier it was used, but as we have learned more about biodiversity, so now we talk, practice, promote biodiversity conservation. So I think this is my first appeal that in your program of studies, please make a small little amend and now henceforth always talk about biodiversity conservation, which means that you are not really freezing biodiversity, but you are allowing it to really evolve and to really move forward with the changing times, with the changing, I should say, stresses of the environment and the climate. And always, therefore, the biodiversity remains relevant with the current environment and with the future environment, and it really evolves along with it. Now, this is my first submission. Now, I will like to share some slides and I will take you through that. Now, how do I do that? I am not able to see security and then reaction. Can you just guide me, Aditi? How do I share my slides? Hello. Yeah.
Sir, it should be right there.
Yeah.
A green colored button
Okay.
in the bottom, which says share screen.
Just hold on. Okay.
So you might want to click on the blue colored Zoom button once
Okay.
in the bottom.
Okay.
Uh, the blue button, the Zoom button.
Okay. I think. Are you able
No,
to
no,
see
sir.
me?
Right in the bottom. Yes, I'm able to see you. You're in the meeting.
Yeah.
The blue button, yes.
Yeah. Just 1 minute.
So right there, the blue button,
The blue button. I'm not able to get it.
the Zoom video icon, sir.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
one.
this one. This one.
This one. Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And now what do I do?
On Zoom Cloud Meetings.
Huh?
So yes. So could you please click on the button again, the blue button,
Okay.
and click on the meeting controls window.
Okay. I've done that, but it comes always join meeting. I don't know.
Gauri ma'am, do we have the slides? I could share it from my screen if that's all right.
I will send you slide, but then it will take time. Or do I do that? I don't know.
Sure, sir.
Then I have to, first of all, screen sharing. Just 1 second. Yeah, now I think I'm better off. There is one green button, share screen, which I don't have to do it, right? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have to click on that button.
Yeah. I should click on that button, share screen, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. It is done then. How do I get to my slides now?
So have you clicked on share screen?
Yes, I have done. Now, Zoom meeting, right? I do that? I don't know.
So after you click on the button, you just have to click on the PPT, the slide directly.
Okay. Again, I will do that. Wait 1 second.
So I think you already have the PPT in the taskbar. You just have to click on share screen and then you have to go to the PPT slides.
Okay. Just hold on, huh? Just 1 minute.
Yes, sir. Yes, no problem. So there's one more thing that we could do. If you can read the slides out and explain to us, that would be fine. We could send the PPT across all the emails when you send us after the lecture. So you'll have to unmute yourself.
I want to share the slides. मीटिंग तो ज्वाइन कर ली नहीं तो did she say how do you share a slide? हाँ नीचे नहीं कुछ नहीं एक सेकंड नहीं होल्ड ऑन क्या करना है आपको ये जूम है दिस इज यू लीव मीटिंग कैंसिल दीज आर द ओनली दिस थिंग आप पूछिए ना हाउ डू यू शेयर दिस
So we could send the PPT across to all the participants afterwards.
I think what I'm going to do is that I'm now going to open the PPT, right? And I will talk now.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Can you see the PPT? Hello?
So you'll have to click on the green share screen button.
Share the screen button. Okay.
Sir, this is Gauri Rani. Can you please just open your Zoom and there is a green icon that is share screen and then we will directly see your PPT.
Okay. Is that all right?
Yes, sir, we can see the screen right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
So I think what is biodiversity is a variability among the living organisms and ecological complexes of which they are part, including diversity within and between species and ecosystems. I think it is a very technical definition, and it is rather a complex definition. It is not simply just the plants and animals that we sometimes say that these few are there and this is biodiversity. No, they are elements of the biodiversity, all right, but they are not the biodiversity as such. Biodiversity is a far more complex and involved concept. Now, in order to really simplify, the textbooks normally say that biodiversity has three components, and these components are species diversity, genetic diversity, and ecosystem diversity. And these three components are not discrete. They are all very intimately integrated. But for simplicity, to really convey the concept of biodiversity, textbooks gave them in this form, which often is construed as they are discrete entities, but they are not. So I think this is another point that I would like to stress. The term biodiversity attempts to reflect the variation of and the interconnection. The more important thing is interconnection. That is more important rather than, so if we have large number of pots in which we have got different plants and we put together in a room, and we can call that as a biodiversity, which is perhaps not the concept of the biodiversity. So anytime, anywhere, artificial collection of plants and animals is not biodiversity. The biodiversity is one where all these elements are functional and are serving as a whole. They are working in unison. Now that is biodiversity. All life on Earth, biodiversity underpins all life on the Earth. That is something we must reckon with. Where biodiversity is found is an interesting question. In fact, biodiversity is found all over the Earth. Of course, its form, its composition varies. For example, in Western Ghats, the biodiversity has a very large expression, trees and so on, shrubs and various kinds of animals, birds. And if you look to the ground, then you will find large number of fungi. and many other small little organisms crawling. And if you really scrap the earth, then you will find many different more inside, hidden in the soil. All this complex is working, and that is the community of organisms living in coordination and in complete harmony. Now, this is, while if you go to a desert, you will find hardly anything which you can recognize from a distance, and even if you take a photograph. But don't get confused. If you really pick up the sand, and if you do a very close examination under the microscope, under a liquid medium, you will find a large number of organisms are there. So a different biodiversity under different set of climatic conditions. And if you go to the Himalayas and finally to the glaciers, you will find again that there is a snow, and one might even conclude that there is no living life, but actually there are a large number of other forms of life that exist, provided we examine under microscope. So I think the biodiversity ranges, therefore, from microorganisms, which are single-celled, to the multicellular organism and large organisms like elephant and whale and so on. So they are all elements of biodiversity. Now, one of the things that is most important is that all life requires energy. And it is through the biodiversity that we harness solar energy. Because you will know that there is nothing which really moves in this material world to which we are familiar without the use of energy. You really walk, you use energy. When your vehicle moves, when the local train moves, you do anything. When you are really talking, thinking, writing, you are moving your hand, and even when you are seeing quietly, you are using energy, and you recoup this energy very frequently by eating in the morning your breakfast, your lunch, tiffin, dinner, supper, and so on. So it keeps on expanding and you keeps on replenishing it. Something like in a car, you keep on putting the fuel. When it gets exhausted, you again refill it. In your mobile phone or in your torch, when the cells have completed their life, you replace them. So I think nothing works without energy. And the only source of energy that we have is the solar energy, which is extraterrestrial, but this energy you cannot capture. During winter, some of us like to bask in the sun, but then we cannot hold this energy. As soon as we come out, I think we have not been able to retain it. But the plants, green plants, maybe large trees, maybe the grass, maybe the microorganisms which we don't see with naked eye. Anything which has got a chlorophyll or which is green in color does a wonderful magic. And this magic is technically known as photosynthesis, where very simple elements such as carbon dioxide, water are synthesized utilizing solar energy and stored in form of carbohydrates, which can be transformed with the magic of the plants into various compounds and various products and various substances. The chemical equation I have given below, but the important point is that we have a system by which we are able to store. We can cut the leaves, we can cut the branches, and we can shift and move. So I think we have stored this energy, and once we burn them, we get the energy back. Now this energy that we get, and when we burn the organic matter, is really the energy which is initially has come, and the source was solar energy. So when we eat fruits, when we eat burger or the boda or whatever, we are really utilizing solar energy. We are unable ourselves to use the solar energy, but we need the agency of the plants to really provide that. The plants are sometimes, for example, cattle grazes grass, which gets converted by the cattle in form of milk. We drive the milk and we get various milk products and we get the energy. So I think this system where one gets connected with the other. Now the cow and the cattle cannot survive without eating the grass, and grass cannot grow without really storing and harvesting solar energy. And the grass also cannot grow without the microbiology machinery which is working in the soil in mobilizing the nutrient and really creating condition for favorably for grass to grow. So I think the microorganisms which are sitting in the soil, the grass, and finally the cattle, and finally the milk and milk bhaiya, and finally the we consumers. So you can see that all of them are related. And if any of them has been knocked off, I think you can't get your milk or you can't have your coffee or a creamer or whatever. So I think this connection and this kinds of functionality that exist between these various types of things, this is a very simple way. Now, this simple chain that I have mentioned is technically known as food chain. So what you are seeing in this slide on the left-hand side is the sun, which is symbolic as a source of energy. Then you have plants, which are eaten up by this deer, and the deer is hunted by the tiger. So you can see that they are all related. Tiger is very mighty, but is not capable, like us, to utilize the solar energy, for which is tries to really get through the deer because it can't eat grass. It has to have animals, and the deer eats the plants, and the plants harvest the solar energy. So I think the plants form a very, very important link for sustaining the entire biodiversity, human activity, the mobility that we have, including everything. I would like also to mention that similar things happen both in other situation also. Here you will find a grasshopper eaten by the frog, and frogs are eaten by the snake, and the snake is eaten by the birds of prey. So I think here, so I think this is a simple. And most of these links that we have are not more than 4 to 5 in any food chain, because at each step, energy gets expended because the frog jumps, energy utilized. So you will find that energy keeps on decreasing as we move through the food chain to the higher level. And all these food chains in nature are also interconnected. They are not independent, but they are all interconnected. And this interconnected network that we see, we call it food web. It is almost like a network of when you open your computer or your mobile phone, what you find various connection and various connections connecting one IC to the other and so on and so forth. Now, this kind of a system means that these are the highways and byways of the energy movement in the system. And this kind of a thing is known as food web. So where are alternatives available, where the food or the energy can move from one to another? I think I'm not going to take much time on this, but what I'm going to say that all these interactions are responsible for giving us a lot of services on which we are dependent. And we are obligately dependent on them. And there are 4 kinds of services that we can get by this kind of interconnection and functionality among the living organism. And these 4 are provisioning services such as food, I have already mentioned, clean water. As rain water we get as it moves through the ground and finally seeps through the land, then a huge number of microorganisms start working on this and clean the water. And finally, in the subsoil, we get clean water. And from the wells, we really draw it. So I think water gets cleaned by the biodiversity. We get fiber, we get timber, and we get large number of medicinal plants and genetic resources. Then there is a regulatory service. It's a different kind, such as regulation of climate. For example, we have got in the climate large amount of moisture which gets collected, and during rains, it gets precipitated. And I think all people in Mumbai are so familiar with the heavy rain, torrential rain that you get. And how do you get it? A large amount of this is really thrown from liquid to the gaseous form by the plants, which we call transpiration. So I think this is one such method by which the clouds get their water, as well as direct evaporation also. And then the flood regulation. If you have got trees and if you have got thick vegetation, the intensity and the frequency of flood is going to be very much reduced. And also regulation of diseases. And we will talk about it a little later in terms of the current disease scenario that we are facing, unfortunately. Then water quality improvement is again because there are a large number of organisms in water, in our estuaries, in our mangroves, which really eat away all the dirt of which that is of no use to us, and improve the water quality, and in fact convert the dirt into the food. So we take out prawns, we take out many other organisms which we like to eat and which we like to enjoy. And also along with this, there is another service about which I will talk a little later, that is pollination. The pollination is one such thing about which we should be little more concerned about. In fact, we should be concerned about everything, but I think this is of great concern to us. Oftentimes you must have seen about this honeybee. And the first reaction that we have that it stings and becomes very painful. But fact of the matter is that honeybees are doing a great service to us, which nobody can do, including a whole group of engineers and machinery that we have. 1/3 of our food comes only through the courtesy of honeybees. They do pollination. That is, the fruit that we get on plants, particularly the mango, which is so popular and so famous and so important for all Indians and also for the farmer. Now, to get the fruit of mango, you require that the pollen, that the male part from the flower must go to the female part of the flower. And who does it? The insects and the kind of honeybee. They really move from one flower to the other. And in the process, their body gets loaded with the pollen, which are microscopic single cell male part, to the female part of the flower, and resulting into formation or initiation of fertilization, and finally fruit, which we harvest as mango. Similarly, there are many other fruits which we get only when the pollination takes place. And the only agents that we have are these specialized organisms. Now imagine there were no such pollinators. How difficult it would be to have a ladder and by forceps bringing pollen from one flower to the other. You can imagine that what kind of hard work is required and how much you can do, what kind of labor is required. And after you get that fruit, you can imagine the price of that fruit. So I think they are really doing this service and we are getting beautiful fruits. And 33% of our crop, many other plants also, are dependent on this pollination service. So I think this is very important. Then the cultural service, such as recreational, aesthetic, and spiritual benefits. When you go to a forest or when you go to a seashore or something like that, I think it relieves you of many problems that you suffer. And therefore, people often go to these places for it. And then finally, the supporting services, such as formation of soil. You know, without soil, no tree will grow. And you will find that nowhere on the face of the earth, there is a factory to form soil. Soil manufacturing factories do not exist. The only way that the soil is formed is through natural process, which is extremely slow and can only be accomplished by the collective action of the biodiversity. So I think if you lose the soil, you cannot grow your plant. And the soil is therefore is not a dead thing, but it is a living system. It has large number of living organisms which are working day and night to really increase the quantity of the soil. So if you have a torrential rain and if you do not protect your soil, it washes out completely. And finally, the fertility and the capacity to hold and grow plants, healthy plants, is also lost. Then nutrient cycling, that is regenerating the nutrients to really bring them, because the quantity of nutrients are limited, they are finite. And as the leaves die, you will find that after rainy season, there is no old and dry leaves are left. They are all processed by the whole battery of microorganisms and various other soil organisms, and the nutrients present in them are released back so that the soil is recharged with the nutrients. So I think this kind of service you don't see often, but what you see is the green growth of the plant. So all these things are working in a sync, and this kind of a functionality is really the property of biodiversity, and it is this
Sir, I think you'll have to unmute yourself. Professor, you'll have to unmute yourself.
is that okay? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, let us species diversity. What are species diversity? Species diversity means that various types of organisms, let's say elephant and ant and kangaroo and all this, these are species. They are all distinguishable from one from another. So these are known as species. A tree of neem, a tree of mahua, a tree of mango, a grass, and a shrub, and so on and so forth. These are all individual species. So I think all of you understand that well. Then there is a genetic diversity. Now look at your class, or look at your friends, or look at the community of Mumbai, or where you stay. You will find that all of us belong to Homo sapien, but each one of us is different. Our eye color is different, our height is different, our constitution of the body is different, our behavior is different, our hands are there with 5 fingers, but then their shape is different, and everything is different. Our color is different, and I think any measurable thing that you have is all different. The size of the nose, the size of the ear, the size of the hand, the size of the leg, everything is different, but there is a commonality that each one of us have 2 hands, Each one of us two eyes, and eyes are in the front of the face. Also, that is one which really puts us into one species, but within this we will find all different. Within your family, you will find you are different from your mother. You are different from your father. You are different from your siblings. So I think all of them has a different setup of genes. So this kind of thing that we find. So each species is again having a huge variety within them. First of all, there are large number of species, and each species have within them a large variety. And therefore, we will find that the COVID-19 affects some very, very severely, but others get only mild infection. And that is because of the genetic diversity that we have. Now, genetic diversity has a lot of economic value. And here comes the question of very soon comes the question of legislation as well as control through legislation. For example, a Alfonso mango costs about 80 to 100 rupees a piece in Delhi. While an ordinary mango, within 100 rupees, you can buy about 30 pieces of different mango. And if it is an ordinary mango, then you can get even about 40 pieces for 100 rupees. So I think you will find that basmati rice costs you about 130 rupees, 150 rupees per kg, but ordinary rice, you can get about 20 rupees. It is because of the genetic difference that we have. So I think there is a lot of money in this genetic difference. Some of us can sing very good song, and many of them has made great money and great name because through genes or through the blessings of the God or whatever you may call it, they have got a very melodious voice and they are able to really sing well, and they are in great demand, and they are considered, many of them have become legend because of this property that they have. While others are such who really cannot do this, cannot accomplish this. So I think you can understand that the genetic variation is a very, very important variation. How we recognize it, how we really pick up, that is a different issue. But every organism or every species has huge genetic variation, and that's a great resource. And all of this has to be supported by someone. And what is this someone? This someone is nothing but ecosystem, as we call it. You must have heard the word. Many times it is used by various people, but I am only saying that it is the ecosystem which really support all of us. Now, just to give you what is an ecosystem, it has no fixed boundaries, but it has some fixed characters by which we can distinguish. There are many types of ecosystems. For example, a river is a different ecosystem, and inside you don't find any tree. Inside you find fish, crabs, insects, and so on, frogs, amphibians. At the same time, you have got a forest where you don't find fish. So I think these are two different ecosystems. Then there is a grassland where you will find green grasses which are short, and the landscape looks entirely different as compared to a forest. Then you have a shrubland. Then you have a desert environment. So I think there are different kind of ecosystems. Now, all these different species have to be accommodated on different ecosystem. It is like something motherboard in which different ICs, etc. you put, and the function becomes different. Either it becomes a projector, or it becomes a mobile phone, or it becomes a radio, or it becomes some kind of a VCR. So I think these motherboards are very different in nature, and these are known as ecosystem. They support. In ocean, you will find a different ecosystem. So I think marine ecosystem, you have a grassland ecosystem, you have got a forest ecosystem, you have got a river ecosystem, you have got a pond ecosystem, and so on and so forth. So I think these are different sets which really accommodate different sets of biodiversity, which again are interconnected the way that I have said. So I think I have mentioned this, and these are the examples of different ecosystem which I have picked up to fire your imagination: forest, grassland, shrubland, desert, river, wetland, and then estuaries and ocean. Then life supports life. You have already seen that how the grass supports the cow and the cow provides sustenance to us. So I think I need not say. Pollinators, bees are crucial agriculture workers. 1/3 of our food, fruits and vegetable would not exist without pollinators. Then we have got a cleanup brigade. And I think the vultures are a very good example. Their sense of smell and eyesight is very sharp. And as soon as they're a dead carcass, they come in large number and swoop down and clean up the carcass within minutes. And what you will get, nothing but the bones are left, which some other way, some other organisms come and they decay and finally they are processed. Now, within your own body, you will be surprised to know that in your stomach or your food cannot be digested unless you are helped by a very large army of organisms. And it has been counted by the Weizmann Institute of Science in Germany that 39 trillion bacterial cells are sitting in our body, human body, which are really functioning day and night to digest the delicious food that we eat and to release energy, which we, or the nutrients that we need for our survival. So you can see that you are dependent on biodiversity, both externally, internally. The oxygen that you are really breathing, and the oxygen that you are breathing is also used by your car and by the factory and by the power plant, is all product of biodiversity. It is the green plants which are doing photosynthesis, and along with making carbohydrate, oxygen is another byproduct released in the atmosphere. So you see that the plants are really utilizing the poisonous gas which we are throwing, which the car is throwing, which the power plant is throwing, utilizing it, and in return giving good gas, oxygen for us to breathe, for our car to really run, and for our stove to burn. So I think you can see that industrial operations are also dependent on biodiversity. So biodiversity is so critical and so important for the human survival and for human communities. And since ages, we have been using it. And in future, there is no other alternative to this. We have to depend on biodiversity. And that is the reason that we should conserve biodiversity. Cooperation among species is absolutely phenomenal. And this is sometimes and oftentimes referred as ecological balance. So finally, biodiversity, we can say, is the foundation of ecosystem services and our industrial society. Now, biodiversity is getting lost in a big way. And biodiversity is really in all geographies and all scales is getting lost. Just to give you a sample, 60% population of mammals, birds, fish, reptile, amphibians have on an average declined by 60% from 1970 to 2014. 20% of the forest in Brazil have been vanished in 50 years. 50% of shallow water corals are lost in past 30 years. So if you are really losing these workers, which are working day and night ceaselessly for running and for keeping the ecosystems healthy, you can imagine that minus these organisms and the members of the brigade, human beings cannot hope to really survive on industrial production, because there is hardly any industry which can produce food, irrespective of what you do, irrespective of what technology you have. So I think we have to ultimately depend on them. And if we are losing them, means that we are losing our support system in a big way. And we cannot continue to afford to lose them. And that is the reason that there is a big call and concern to conserve biodiversity. So multiple species will disappear. Many times we will learn. How many species are there is a big question which is oftentimes asked. And I think nobody has an answer. So far, we have identified 1.3 million species. But the scientists believe that there are 8.7 million species, which means a majority of these species are yet to be discovered and identified. So you can understand that our understanding of the biodiversity, in spite of all the advances that we have made, is still limited. So biodiversity conservation, therefore, is vital to maintain our own life support system. Just in the Indian context, if I have to put it, 2.4% of the global land area India has within its territory. And we are supporting 17.7% of the global human population. So you can understand that our demand on the biodiversity is very high. And therefore, for this reason alone, we have to care for our biodiversity on this small land area that we have within our national territory. Over and above, we have got a large livestock population. Our country is home to 7% of the recorded species, 2.4% land area, and 7% of the biological species that we have. So I think we are very lucky that in a small area, a huge biodiversity we have inherited, or we are really having as a great asset. In the entire world, there are 36 global biodiversity spots, of which we have got sections of 4 biodiversity hotspots. Hotspots are those where biodiversity is available in very large and in very dense quantity. That is an area where many, many different species are present together and many, many different ecosystems are present together. So that is what we call as biodiversity hotspots. And these are very critical for conserving biodiversity for our future generations and for our posterity. Conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecosystem services they provide are vitally important for ecological security, climate security, and they have direct bearing on the country's economic, cultural, and societal well-being. Now, to see this extraordinary loss of biodiversity, the United Nations and Community of Nations have put their head together sometimes in 1992, and they came up with a convention on biological diversity. It is international legislation, and it was really passed. And to begin with, 150 governments have appended their signature, and today there are 96 parties which really are committed to the conservation of biodiversity. But unfortunately, at the same time, or fortunately at the same time, the Climate Framework Convention was also agreed upon. Now, on the climate front, we have made a lot of progress, noise, discussion, and has become more popular. But the Biological Diversity Convention has not been able to really hold much interest of the governments. And as a result, despite numerous government pledges, biodiversity loss is accelerating unabated in all regions of the world. But the foregoing discussion, which I have really discussed with you, shared with you, now you can understand that whatever we may do, unless we save the biodiversity, our survival is at stake. And if our survival is at stake, then any progress or any advancement in technology is of no meaning. So I think if to make these things meaningful and to enjoy the modern science and technology and the development in a way that is legitimate for us, it is important first to really safeguard the biodiversity. And this is what we are now talking about. And we have got during September 2015, world governments again came together and were concerned about the welfare of the people, the planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. So I think these are 5 P's which are really identified in form of 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 sub-goals. Without going into the detail, the most important is that these are very 17 items. If they are looked after, then I think it is possible to ensure the growth and prosperity of the people, which will ultimately bring peace. And all this can be achieved through partnership. And I will just elaborate how biodiversity has an interface with each one of these objectives for which the governments have committed themselves. Now, the first one is no poverty. Now, poverty is an expression where you are deprived of your resources. So if you have a poor soil, if you have degraded your forests, if you have really lost the resources by which carbon dioxide can be attracted and new products and new fruits and new crops can be grown, and if the soil is not there to really sustain, then I think the poverty is going to be perpetual. So I think poverty is, the wealth comes only when the soil is capable of producing. Ultimate wealth comes there. Finally, the processing takes place, and there are many other market forces which distribute this initial product, and they shift the prosperity, or through commerce, it becomes further distributed, redistributed, so on and so forth. But to begin with, it comes from the soil, and the source is the solar energy, and the agents are the biodiversity. So I think this is very important. Biodiversity is directly related to poverty. If a farmer is not able to get its crop because of the climate change, and if the crop is really lost, then actually he becomes very poor, remains poor, and so on and so forth. And you will find that because of the COVID-19, the poverty level is increasing. And I think we have got a large number of people which are below poverty line. And in India, as you know, that on an average, if you put rural and urban, 22% of the people are below poverty line. So it's a big backlog. We have improved a lot, but I think it is a big backlog for us to really make up for the target of 2013, by which all these objectives or the goals have to be achieved. So I think poverty is a very, very serious issue. And the COVID-19 has really created a situation where a large number of people who have just crossed the poverty line has been again pushed back, not only in India, world over. So I think all over the world, about 1.3 billion people live below poverty line in a very significant way. And there is a big problem on that. Now, zero hunger. You know that we are able to produce enough food, but I think there are problems and problems. It is not equity, it's not equally distributed and equally available. And a large number of people are not able to have 2 square meals. And many of them are really remain hungry, and they really are not able to get, and their nutritional level is very poor. There are 2 types of hunger that you have in our community. Number one is that not enough calories, and at the same time, there is a hidden hunger. When I say hidden hunger, I mean to say that they are deficient in nutrients, iron, for example, calcium for that matter, and for that matter, many other small nutrients that we need for healthy living. And I think their number is very large. And all this, along with this obesity, which is another, I should say, expression of kind of a problem with our nutrition. So all these are very large in number. And I think all this is happening because we are either eating too much of carbohydrate and not having enough component of protein and many other nutrients, which the various fruits are able to provide. And because many fruits are not available in large number, because the pollinators have come down, because we are using pesticides and very other toxic agrochemicals, which are killing these agents, which are of great help to us. So I think here again, the biodiversity has to play a big role. If we really save it, then the quality of the fruit improves. The quality of, not only the quality, but the per tree or per plant, the number of fruits that really are there also increases. So I think the production increases. As the production increases, the poverty gets reduced. So I think you can see the connection. They are all interconnected. And the good health. If you do not get healthy food, and if you do not have the nutrients that you need, then what you see that you will suffer from nutrient deficiency. So I think a very large population of India, as well as other parts of the world, are really suffering from iron deficiency and many other deficiencies. As a result, eyesights become very weak. Sometimes blindness also comes in. And I think the good health is also a very, very important and is dependent upon healthy nutrition, balanced nutrition, and so on. So I think this is where it is. And the quality education. Now, the quality education means that if you have got a good harvest and if you have got water at your doorstep, because we have got thick vegetation, we have maintained the watershed, and we are really conserving watershed, then what will happen that ladies and the children, which are often deployed to bring water from long distances, their time is lost and their energy is wasted, will have more time and more energy to really devote themselves to education. And the women or the mother will have more time to really look after their children and their nutrition, so that they are really comforted and they can really devote more time and attention to their education. So I think the primary education, a large mass of the people will have a better opportunity if we have taken care of this. And the underlying factor in this is again biodiversity in a big way, because wherever we have seen that there is a deforestation, we find that the springs have dried up and the water sources have been finished, which were in plenty in yesteryears. And therefore, people have to move longer and longer distances, and they do not have a spare time to devote to education and to their cultural activities and so on. Now, gender equality, again here, is very simple, that it is the women folk and the children who have to suffer, both in terms of the quality of the food as well as in terms of the workload. So I think here again, the gender equality is also in a subtle manner can be improved a great degree, provided we have got a good biological resources with us. Since the time is running short, so I will just like to say that we have already discussed how the biodiversity and the microorganisms really improve the water quality. And if the water quality is good, then the question of sanitation already becomes somewhat easier for us to handle. So these are again, and once we do that, then I think it ensures and feeds back to our health, that the waterborne diseases gets reduced and the general load on the hospitals is less, and the national exchequer, which otherwise is devoted to the hospital and the medical care, can be made use of other, or the medical care can improve a great deal to take care of the health. So I think here are again, in a very subtle manner, the biodiversity really plays a very important role, which is often not realized as clearly as I'm trying to really say that it really is one of the important factors. Then secondly, affordable and clean energy. The renewable energy is the mantra of today. Atmanirbhar Bharat or Swachh Bharat is only going to be when we have got renewable energy. So here you will find that I will just quote one example. Ethanol is going to be blended with the petrol so that it really works the same way. And the source of ethanol is the sugarcane and the sugarcane molasses, which otherwise was not being utilized effectively, is a very important source. So you will find that the price and the reward of the sugarcane increases, and as it increases, and if you have got then I think the wealth and the economic situation and the status of the farmer will go and will become better, and therefore the poverty will get reduced and zero hunger. So I think it is again here that the biodiversity element, sugar, and can be of great help. At the same time, if we are using biomass in an effective way and burn it properly, and the burning conditions are improved, then you will find that many of the fossil fuel needs get reduced, so that import bill, etc., can go down, and we will have clean energy, and we are not going to really load our environment with extra carbon dioxide, which result into climate change. And then I will come to the reduced inequality. Of course, today the inequality is increasing because there is have and have nots. Their number is increasing and it is becoming very contrasting. And this contrast is really propelled, or at least the underlying factors are poverty and hunger. And all these factors, and then coupled with, I should say, poor education or illiteracy. So illiteracy, hunger, and all this is the main cause of this inequality and all kinds of taboos that we really develop and do. And you will find that today's world is highly divided. We thought that we are going to have a globalization, economic globalization and integration and so on. But today it is all falling apart. And I think individual countries are looking after their own interest in a very significant way. I think the EU is breaking up, and there are many other countries which are becoming more individualistic than what they were in yesteryears because of the constraints that they are facing. And I think there is every country which is suffering seriously about their biodiversity loss. So I think this is a very big contributory factor, if not the only factor resulting into this. Then you have got sustainable cities, and we are talking of the smart cities. And I think in Mumbai also we are having a smart city project. In Delhi also we have, and there are 100 smart cities which are envisaged by the present government. And you will find that the sustainable cities and smart cities can only be possible where inside we have got bodies of water which are clean, we have got groves of trees and many other things, and we have got some patches of greenery, such as you have got the Borivali National Park and so on. Now, these are the very great assets. These are green assets that the city must have to be sustainable. And the trees must be there to soak up the carbon dioxide that the transports and the individual cars are emitting. And therefore, all these things become very comfortable. Once you have trees and under the groove, if you have a house, then your air conditioner work less and your power bills also come less. So I think you can see that there is a saving all the way, both in the individual, collectively carbon dioxide emission becomes less. And I think city becomes more sustainable. And that is what it is. And because of the city, you will find that there are hot spots, which we call as, and which become very, very unbearable during peak of the summer. But if you have grooves of trees and if you have water bodies, then you will find that most of these hot spots, which are so characteristics of the large cities and urban areas, becomes less intense and more tolerable and much better. You will find and you will see that whenever there is a sunshine, most of the people stand under the shade of a tree. It's a very natural way of really comforting yourself from the scorching sun. Many of the small time, I should say, informal sector people are also sitting. Such as cobblers and many other people who are doing small jobs, they are there under the tree, and the cycle puncher and all those kinds of small job people are really getting a shelter as well as one of the best places to really operate and earn their livelihood. So I think these sustainable cities, etc., must have avenues, must have shade avenues, so that the road temperature remains low. If you are moving on a road where there is a large groove of, then the temperature is low and it is working. The responsible consumption and production. When we talk of this, then I'm talking about something which is very important. You see that whatever we are producing today, 1/3 of that is simply wasted. The food that we are producing after spending a lot of effort of fertilizer, water, and so on gets wasted, doesn't really come to our plate at all. And if you see the waste that we are generating, half-eaten food, and in particularly it becomes visible when parties are there and marriage parties are there, that you will find what kind of a wastage that it takes place. All this food is very expensive. Farmers have worked very hard. Large number of people remain without food, but at the same time, we are really wasting. And it is estimated that globally, about 1/3 of the total produce is get wasted. It is never reaches the mouth for which they are really meant. And if we really convert this, then in terms of money, it is 400 billion of rupees which are wasted annually. At the same time, 1.2 billion people can be fed from the food that we waste. So I think hunger can be eliminated if we become more responsible in terms of growing our food, and also in terms of managing our food, and also in terms of growing our food, that we can grow food organically where does not require pesticide and fertilizer in doses in which we are using, which are also a major source of environmental pollution, water pollution, and killing our pollinators and killing our biodiversity in a big way. Similarly, the climate action, we always say that there are grow more trees to really reduce the carbon dioxide impact that we are having. So I think here again, the biodiversity in a very, very simple way is helping us to handle one of the most complex problems that mankind is facing in the history of its total survival on this planet. The life underwater is also very seriously improved if we really care that water pollution is prevented, the coastal pollution is prevented, the washing of the silt, as well as throwing wholesale human garbage and human excreta is prevented, then I think the fish will be far more, their numbers will be far more, fishermen will get more fish. It will bring most prosperity to the people, the more prosperity for our export, and more prosperity to the national exchequer, and the more income for the government, and more income becomes available for community work and community welfare. The life on land is, again, I have already mentioned in great detail, and all this will result into peace. The conflict will go down. But once we have people will have more resources and they are satisfied with their basic needs, I think they will have less of tension than what we are seeing, and what we are seeing that over a period of time they are increasing. So I think I have really briefly discussed and shown you in a very simple way, though I have taken a little more time than what I was intended, that how closely we have got an interface with every facet of our life with the biodiversity, and more particularly the objectives. These are known as 17 goals, and each one of them is going to be greatly benefited, and in fact is going to be dependent, I should say, not only benefited, is not entirely, but greatly dependent upon conservation, improvement, and I should say, a welfare of the biodiversity. In biodiversity welfare, we see our own welfare. So I think this is something I would like to really say, that today Global Hunger Index of India is not, unfortunately, not very happy one. We are 94 out of 107 nations for which the Global Hunger Index has been calculated for the year 2020. And I think zero hunger is something which we are not going to achieve, and we are not going to really succeed and achieve the target that we have set for ourselves. Coronavirus pandemic has laid many things bare, and no one more than how it has shown how the world is interconnected. Without food, there can't be good health. They're so simple. And the coronavirus pandemic and national lockdown since March 25 have unleashed an unprecedented medical, social, economic catastrophe. The whole country has been in a state of forced inactivity. Global food supply chains have already buckling because many countries, particularly the Europe, the Japan, and so on, they are importing large quantities of food from outside, from the developing world. So I think if the shipping is not there and they are not operated because of the COVID-19, I think these food chains are greatly disrupted. So I think even the wealthy countries can face a serious problem of food availability and so on if these conditions are not remedied fast enough. The biodiversity linkages are now recognized internationally in a multiple of institutions. The Global Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service is one such document that we have. A special report of global biodiversity of 1.5 degrees centigrade presented by IPCC year before last year is also calling upon that we can achieve these targets provided we care and protect and conserve biodiversity. The report of the state of world's biodiversity and food and agriculture also talks about that we have to conserve the agricultural biodiversity. You see, in India, we have got 110,000 varieties of rice suited for different areas, geographies, and climatic condition and soil condition. But today, because of the, I should say, this green revolution as well as commercialization, there are only 60,000 varieties are left. So I think it's a very major loss of genetic diversity of agricultural crops that we are suffering from. The World Ocean Assessment, which has only been recently completed, has also really warned us and has given that a warning signal that we have to save our seas in order to really save our fisheries, in order to save the livelihood of a large number of fishermen, as well as wholesalers, as well as major other operators who depend on them, or at least who service them for their livelihood and for their continued economic well-being. So recently, UN held a summit on biodiversity only last month, 30th September 2020, and call for urgent action on biodiversity for sustainable development. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, I have just tried to really give you a very quick window on the biodiversity, its importance in our life, and it is important in our social and economic well-being. And it is not merely a talk or simply some kind of a, I should say, a romantic attachment with the biodiversity, but the real, substantial, and a very vital and most fundamental relationship that we have with biodiversity. And therefore, we should really save it for our own well-being and for the well-being of our future generation. It is a transgenerational resource. It is a resource which really replicates itself without anybody's aid and help. And therefore, it is a green asset. It is an asset on which we have dependent. Our forefathers were dependent, we are dependent, and our future generations are also going to be dependent, as there is no alternative and there is no substitute to that. With this, I will thank you for your patient hearing, which has been a little longer than what I intended, and for your patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for that amazing lecture, sir. If you permit, we could take up the questions posted in our chat box.
With pleasure, with pleasure.
Sir, there's a question from Ravi Ahuja. They ask, government frequently attempt to convert forest zones into industrial or commercial zones with a view to boost economy. It is claimed that biodiversity loss can be mitigated by transposing biodiversity from one point to another. Can you please enlighten us if a biodiverse environment existing in one place can be transposed from one place to another without affecting the flora and fauna of the original place?
Yes, I think it's a very good question. Can we take all the three questions together? That will be good, or should I keep on answering one after another? Whatever you suggest.
Wherever you feel right, sir.
Okay, first of all, this question. Thank you very much for this question, and I'm very happy that you have asked this question. You see, it is something like this. I try to explain it in my lecture that biodiversity is very site specific. If you go to a forest, sometimes Khandala or somewhere, you will find that there is, from a distance, there is a lot of greenery. But as you walk through, you will find there are some places rock, which is an outcrop. Nothing is growing there. But on the side of the rock, where the rock ends, you will find that the grass and the trees and something is growing. So I think it is not possible to grow everything everywhere. That is number one, that we must understand. Let us take the example from our own body. Hairs are on our head. And when we lose hair from our head and somebody says, I will provide you hair, but on your palm, do you think you will agree to that? So biodiversity is very specific. What biodiversity can grow in desert, it will support a different kind of biodiversity rather than a biodiversity that we will find in Northeast or in Western Ghats. They are very different. And whatever biodiversity that we get in Western Ghat, and if you go to the Madhya Pradesh or to Rajasthan or to Orissa in some parts, or I should say Chhattisgarh, you will find a different kind of biodiversity. There you will find that you have got large number of deciduous trees, while in Western Ghats, you will find a large number of evergreen trees. So I think the biodiversity is different in every different places. But we have to have industrial estates. So I think it is possible that to have industrial estate at the same time the biodiversity together, rather than have first a clean area and then establish the industry. Why it is not possible to have an industry and then between the industry you leave the natural vegetation also, so that the disturbance is minimum. And when you have an industry, of course you have to have, where machines are there, no biodiversity is going to be there. There is hardly any possibility. But at the same time, it rather than having a clean sweep, it is possible to really have an industrial estate which is also green and which is also a compromise, if not completely a clean sweep or something total deforestation. So I think this is my answer in two parts. First, it is not possible to grow biodiversity. When you plant trees and we say that we are really doing afforestation, I think we are really not able to understand. When you afforest, all trees are of the same age. But if you go to a forest and if you see a natural vegetation, you will find all trees and vegetation have a different age. Some are very old, some are very young, still others are seedling. And I think it is this which provides the dynamicity to the biodiversity, and it is this which really takes care. I will give you another example. When you have all the trees of the same kind, they all flower at the same time and they all fruit at the same time. And no tree fruits all the 12 months. So for some time, there will be a lot of food available. And other times, let us imagine the mangoes. I mean, there's the season of the mango. After that, there is no fruit. So if they are organisms which are dependent and which need food, they need food every day. But the mangoes are available only for a short period of time. So what happens then? Next. So I think these plantations are very good. They provide greenery, all right, but they are very, very poor specimen as compared to a natural forest. And therefore, their functionality, their utility, and their advantage is very limited. So I think all these things we must keep in mind. And that is the reason that the natural biodiversity, that is the nature's accomplishment or a gift to us, must be conserved to the extent possible, and disturbance must be minimum. It will be just, to my mind, keeping ourselves in some kind of illusion that we will be able to create biodiversity at our will anywhere that we want. Perhaps this is not the case. Next.
So I don't think we have any other questions left. Yes, sir, I think we've answered all the questions. There were 3 questions clubbed in one together, which you just answered.
Yeah.
And so I once again thank you for that very interesting and informative lecture. I'm sure that our participants have hugely benefited out of today's discussion, and we look forward to many such interactions with you in the near future. I would now like to invite one of our members, Mr. Anugrah Joy, to present the vote of thanks. Anugrah?
Yes. Thank you, Aditi, for giving me this opportunity. So, I, Anugrah Joy, member of the Justice ML Pense Environmental Laws Chair, on the behalf of my entire chair and the university, I would like to thank Sir for sharing with us valuable knowledge and making us more aware about the significance of biodiversity. We hope that this webinar was helpful considering the valuable spirit of the environment in the nascent times. I would also like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Dr. Dilip Uke, and our Honorable Registrar Sir, Professor Dr. Anil Warrier, who is also the chair professor of this committee at our university. I would also like to thank Gauri Rane ma'am, Aditi Moral, and the entire team for contributing to the success of this event. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the participants for participating in this webinar and sparing their valuable time and contributing to making the event a success with their intriguing questions and positive attitude. We hope that you will show us the same kind of enthusiasm for our future events. Thank you everyone for attending this session. And before anyone leaves, just a note for all the participants. We have shared the link to the feedback form in the chat box. Please share with us your valuable feedbacks. Once again, thank you so much, sir. We feel honored to have you today with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nice. So nice it was, sir. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
This is a gentle reminder to everyone. Kindly fill out the feedback form to avail the certificate for this session. And the link to this feedback form has been posted in the chat box. Thank you all for attending.